This is The Perspective.
Hey everybody, if you are seeing this, this means that we will not be returning. The perspective will not return for um, the foreseeable future. I don't know if we will be back. If we will be back, and if we will, I don't know when that will be. Um, this is just a thank you message. So thank you to not only all the guests who came on this show throughout the time that we were on the air here. And I'm going to go down the list because every single one of them deserves a thank you. Alex Sogard, Dave Calabro, Lance Scheib, Ryan Hawk, Allie Matters, Alan Roach, Tom Nichols, Mackenzie Hefferlin, Pat Boylan, Greg Lovelady, Kelly Ford, Brad Brownell, Dave Sims, Jason Doyle, Shay Neal, Katrina Merriweather, Larry Hanskin. Thank you to all of you for spending, some time out of your busy lives to come on and talk with me, and really just allow me to pick your brain about your career, your life, and what you do. And it was an honor, especially for some of those of you that may have been very busy. I may have spent 5 minutes with you. I may have spent 25 minutes with you, but it was time that I thoroughly enjoyed. So thank you for that. I don't know if we will be back. I we'll make those decisions here over the foreseeable future. If we are not back, thank you very much to not only the guests we've had on this show, but to every single one of you for listening. Whether you listened to the show for my takes on sports, maybe it wasn't that was what you wanted to hear, or you thought my takes were wrong, which is okay, it happens. But whether you listen for the show content itself or the interviews, if you spend any time with us at all on Friday afternoons throughout our time here on this great station, I really appreciate it. I don't know if we will be back, but if we are not, it's been an honor and a privilege. Thank you very much.
Funny story. So I was at called Connor Prairie. It's an outdoor venue, and I was with a bunch of friends, my wife, and we were on the dance floor. And my wife, I didn't have my cell phone with me. I always have my cell phone, but I was on a date. And I'm like, I'm going to leave my cell phone behind. So I was on the dance floor with my wife and a bunch of friends. And I have two sons, and my 28-year-old sent a text to my wife saying, Andrew Luck just retired. And my wife held the phone up to me in the middle of a crowd of about 300 people. And I was like, what? And I know my son, I knew he doesn't, that wouldn't be something he would joke around. He knows my business. So I literally looked at my wife and said, I got to go. And I ran. And 40 minutes later, I was downtown and I was live on Channel 13 talking about Andrew Luck's retirement. One of the craziest stories I've ever covered too.
So the reason that I named my podcast The Learning Leader Show is because when I think about the leaders in my life who've impacted me the most and who have impacted others the most, is the fact that they are constantly working on themselves to improve, to grow, to get better, regardless of their accomplishments, awards won, whatever, money earned, whatever it may be. They were constantly working on bettering themselves, and the learning process and the learning cycle never stops. And so I try to let students or let anybody know that I'm speaking with that this idea of arriving doesn't exist. We're always becoming. And JJ Redick, another guy with a sports background who plays in the NBA, said that to me. We've never arrived. We're always becoming. And I think that's the mindset I try to share and preach with others that I'm working with, that regardless of the mountain that you're able to climb, that there are other mountains and we should continue looking for them and trying to climb them. Certainly take moments to appreciate what we've done and to celebrate with loved ones, but then to wake up the next day and get back after it and constantly work on developing yourself. So regardless of whatever you're able to accomplish, be grateful for the people in your life who have helped you accomplish those things, and then continue working on yourself to get better and better each day. And having a mindset like that, I found if you are consistent about it over time, it seems to be helpful.
I think the biggest thing that I took from my playing days is I'm highly competitive. If we're playing checkers, Parker, I want to beat you. Simple as that.
Right.
And that competitive nature is what I try to get across to my kids, because today kids don't compete. If it gets hard, they quit. Well, life is hard. Life is really hard. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I took from my playing days. Very fortunate at Warren Central High School, then at Purdue. But you had to be competitive, because if you're not and you don't compete at the highest level all the time, then you're going to struggle to be successful, whether it's as a teacher, as a father, as a, whatever it might be. And so that's really what I try to instill in all of our kids, is those that are successful are highly competitive. And when you compete, great things happen.
It's weird. Like, you think back and it was ever changing. One week it was like, all right, like, I think, and I remember, when our season got canceled and we were trying to, chat with our student athletes and Zoom meet and all this stuff. And I was like, guys, like, by August, this will all be figured out. Like, we're fine. Like, it's just only March, like, we were in the middle of practice when they said, hey, this COVID thing seems pretty serious. We're going to send all out of season sports home. And the kids were like, woo, no school, and now here we are a year later. So I think, it was just, it wasn't etched in stone when we would be able to take the floor again. So I think that element of like, God, we got to be ready whenever that time comes. I think if they would have said, hey, you will be able to compete on January 3rd, there maybe have been, a little downtime, or maybe the team would have been like, oh, that's light years away. I have time to sit on the couch and hang out. So I think that suspense of not knowing when it would be time to go really kept everyone on their toes and in good shape.
Certainly. Lots of embarrassing moments. As far as making a mistake, my favorite mistake and my biggest mistake, and kind of the only mistake I can remember, I'm sure there's been more, at least the biggest mistake I remember, excuse me, was I don't remember what year it was. You could look it up. It was the day that Mark McGwire got traded from the Oakland A's to the St. Louis Cardinals. If you remember, you're not as old as I am, but Mark McGwire and Jose Canseco were the Bash brothers in Oakland.
Right.
And their manager was Tony La Russa, and the A's were a great team. And at some point after their peak, Tony La Russa left the Oakland A's and went to be the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals. And I think it was just a little bit later that same year, maybe in late April or May, early June, something like that. The news broke while we were doing a Rockies game, so like at 6 o'clock in the evening here in Colorado, that Mark McGwire had been traded from the Oakland A's to the St. Louis Cardinals to go rejoin Tony La Russa. And where I did my announcing at Coors Field was in the press box. And so I was around, 24 or more writers constantly, baseball writers from both the home team and the away team. And so there was a buzz in the press box for a half hour, if I walked back to grab a drink, that's what everybody was talking about, was Mark McGwire. While we're sitting there doing the game, everyone's talking about Mark McGwire. The writers are writing stories about Mark McGwire being traded. Mark McGwire got traded. Mark McGwire got traded. That's all I heard for a half hour. We were playing the Cubs that night, and the first baseman for the Chicago Cubs is named Mark Grace. Mark Grace came up to bat, and I opened the microphone just like I always do, and I said, first baseman, number 17, Mark McGwire. I didn't know that I had said Mark McGwire. I assumed I had said Mark Grace. My brain thought I said Mark Grace. But when I said that, I saw all the people in the stands in front of me turn around and look. All the heads in the press box turn around and look. The guy, Mike Swanson, who sits right next to me, who was the PR director for the Rockies then, hits me and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean, what am I doing?" He said, "You said Mark McGwire." I said, "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did." I looked down. Mark Grace was staring up at me from home plate with an ugly look on his face. He grounded out to like the second baseman on the first pitch. And as he ran back to the dugout, he was staring up into the press box. And so I had a chance 5-6 years later. Mark Grace was a television commentator for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And when they came to Coors Field one day, I saw him in the hallway and stopped him. And I said, "Hey, Mark, my name's Alan Roach. I'm the PA announcer here. Do you remember the day that Mark McGwire?" "Yes, I remember." He said, "I MF'd you all the way back to the dugout."
By play. When I was going into my second year with the Pacers, I was 25, 26. Mark was getting an award. Mark Boyle was getting an award for something he had done in the community, and he wasn't able to make a preseason game. If it was a regular season game, he probably would have skipped the award ceremony. But since it was a preseason game, he wanted to go to it. Our bosses cleared it off. It was just, it was just a preseason game, but it was the opportunity as a 25, 26-year-old, I can't remember exactly how old I was, to call NBA a dream of mine. And, I will never forget what it felt like to sit in that chair, put on that headset, get to call that game. A couple of years later, Chris Denary, his son was getting married, and there was a game he couldn't do. And ended up being a game in Chicago against the Bulls, where I filled in for him on TV. So that was my first experience getting to do the Pacers on television. And that's still, a lot of people, when I'm doing interviews, they talk about, how you've made it to this point. And don't get me wrong, I take a lot of pride and passion in where I am right now. But in a lot of ways, in more ways than not, I'm still somebody that's on the ladder that is still trying to climb it. I want to be an NBA play-by-play announcer. And so those opportunities to step in there have just been, wow moments. And it was then a couple of years later where unfortunately Chris got a kidney stone the morning before a game in New York. And they called me up, said, "Hey, we think we're going to need you. We're going to have you on a plane in 90 minutes. You need to catch it to New York." I woke up that morning thinking I wasn't doing a whole lot that day, except for getting ready for the game as the host and sideline reporter on the radio broadcast. Next thing I knew, I was in the Garden sitting courtside with Clyde Frazier to my left and Quinn Buckner on my right, calling this game. I mean, I still laugh when I tell the story. It's been almost 2 years, and it's still so ridiculous and so surreal of a moment that it's something I'll never forget. And then unfortunately, Mark was in a scenario where he was contact traced with COVID. He never actually caught it, but he was in a contact tracing scenario that took him out of a couple games this past season, and I got to fill in for him. And so I think I've had so much good fortune and so many great opportunities in this industry and with the Pacers and with the Fever, Pacers Sports and Entertainment. But it's those moments when, I've gotten to taste the type of job that ultimately I aspire to be able to do one day full time. Those from a personal perspective stand out to me.
Yeah, I'm honestly not exactly sure how it originated, where it originated. I've always had it, like for as long as I can remember. I remember being a very young kid, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years old, and we used to get the paper at my parents' house. I know newspapers are kind of going by the wayside now. We used to get the Indy Star, and I remember when that paper would come, I pulled the sports section out and I'd read it front to back. And one day my mom asked me, "Well, Kelly, don't you want to read something else? The business section, the living section, just the general news, world news, local news." And it dawned on me that, oh my gosh, there are other sections of the newspaper. I mean, for me, it's always been sports. I've always loved sports. I played sports growing up. Soccer was my favorite sport to play. Football is my favorite sport to watch. So for me, it's something it's hard to explain. It's always been there. And it probably stemmed a little bit from, as I mentioned, I have a couple sisters. 2 of them are older, 1 is younger. My older sisters played sports, so I was always being dragged to their sporting events. And I think it's just something that took for me at a very young age and has always been there. So college football is probably my absolute bar none favorite sport to watch. And it works out well because in the Horizon League, we do have 2 members who sponsor football, but we as a league do not sponsor it. So it actually allows me to kind of watch football on the weekends instead of working football events as I did in grad school when I was at Ohio University.
Well, the people, I think in any job, you you want to be around great people. You want to be around people that you enjoy spending time with. You need alignment in your university. Athletics has to be important. From the president, board of trustees, athletic administration, your AD. If you feel like you have good alignment, communication, if you enjoy the people you're around, that gives you a chance to be successful. And the people at Wright State were great. Administratively, Mike Cusack, Bob Grant, folks that I got to work with that recruited me there, hired me, and both of them were the AD when I was the coach, and I had wonderful experiences with them. They were always trying to make the program better, and we were always trying to put our heads together and think of ways to improve. And the players that I coached were great, coached a lot of great players. We had some tremendous success, but they were fun to be around, very coachable, hardworking guys. And so the people always make the job. And then the fan base was outstanding. We had an incredible environment there at the Nutter Center. People in the city of Dayton are extremely passionate about basketball. Basketball is important there. So man, it was just a fun place to coach. And we had met some great friends and families that we still keep in contact with today from our time living in Beaver Creek. So really the people above everything was what was special about my time at Wright State. We couldn't have had a better 4 years than the time we had there.
Well, I mean, come on, it was 20 years since the Mariners had made the playoffs, and this is the closest that, in the time I've been there, my 15th year, closest we've been. It's probably in the other 5 years I wasn't prior during that, let's say they haven't made since 01. So, I mean, it's a city, Seattle, and a region, Pacific Northwest, that's hungry for baseball, loves baseball, and loves good baseball. And this team, it's been a great overachieving story. And, we had 45,000 Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday afternoon. And everybody wanted to be a part of that history-making situation. And that's why the GoPro camera was put in there by Tim Walsh, our social media guy, because he wanted to chronicle not only have the audio calls, which you're going to get anyway, but actually see, even it's more, behind the curtain to see, me, Aaron Goldsmith, Rick Riz make the calls and to chronicle, what would be a great time with the Mariners making the playoffs again. And it just so happened that, I was on TV that night. I had the last series of the season on TV, and it was an unbelievable moment. I mean, 4-3, and bases loaded. You got one of your best hitters up there, and he comes through, and it was pure emotion. All from the heart, all from not only being a broadcaster, but being a fan of the team, and an employee of the team, and knowing these guys, and knowing Mitch, and seeing him since he came here from Arizona. And it was big for everybody. I mean, if you're a Mariner fan, it was just big, 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 and big. And it was, and I just reacted. I just reacted. I was wishing and hoping for something good to happen, and it didn't. And I showed my excitement.
I mean, that opportunity. Well, the first time I ever did PA was at a tournament on a Saturday morning. I was managing. It was 4 teams, so it was like a morning session, an afternoon session, and we played in the first game, and in the second game, we're scouting the other 2 teams. And for some reason, I got zoned in on the PA announcer. I thought the guy was just really, really good. And there was a break in between the morning and afternoon sessions, and I went with a couple buddies to get some popcorn or a drink. And all of a sudden, I looked over and I saw the PA announcer sitting by himself. And I told my buddies, I said, "Hey, over there, that's the PA announcer. I think I'm going to go tell him he's really good." And they looked at me like I was on drugs. I mean, like, what? Why would you want to go talk to this guy? What are you talking about? And I went over to him. I said, my name is Jason Doyle. I'm the manager on the Oak Hill basketball team. I just want to let you know, I think you're really good at what you do, and maybe someday I'll get to do what you do. And I'll never forget what he said. He looked at me and said, "You're a manager on the Oak Hill team." I said, "Yes." He goes, You won your first game?" I said, "Yes." "You're playing the championship?" I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Well, your players better than I do. Won't you do their starting 5? I nearly had a heart attack, 13 years old. And I went back to my buddies and I said, "Hey, I'm going to do our starting 5. And they said, "No way, come on, you're crazy." And I did. And I will tell you, that first time, my heart was pounding out of my chest. I literally was so nervous. But once I did it, I turned on that microphone, I fell in love.
Wow. There's just been so many. I think I'll go back to early in the time at Dayton. Once I got here, I had a lot of, I'll share an anecdote what it's like to work in small market radio back when, you got to do a lot of different things there. I was working in WBNO in Bryan, Ohio, and we're broadcasting a high school playoff game that was, we were broadcasting from Napoleon, which was a little bit of ways from Bryan. And it was just on the edge of where our remote transmitter could work. In order for it to work, we had to put a big antenna up in the air, and it was snowing. So the general manager of the radio station, and kind of like the town idiot, some guy, they called him the town fool. He was obviously a special needs type person that, swept out the theater, did odd jobs, but, he hung around the radio station, and my boss grabbed him, and they got in the car and they drove out with an extension for the antenna, and they took turns standing in a snowstorm holding the antenna up so that we could get the game on the air. And they'd come in at the end of each quarter and they'd be covered with snow and be freezing. And, that was, it's not big time broadcasting. It's just hook or crook or, finding a way to get it done. In that same year, broadcasting a high school basketball game in a gym that was so small that you couldn't be physically inside the gym to broadcast. There wasn't enough room. So we broadcast standing in the hallway, looking into the gym, and the scoreboard was directly above my head. So the only way I could read the scoreboard was in the reflection on the opposite backboard. And of course, everything's transposed. So I had to read the numbers backwards and the time and everything. Those are fond memories, because, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, but I don't know that I expected anything different. And so, so that kind of sets the stage for then, I come here and I got to go to NCAA tournaments and I've been to Hawaii and Puerto Rico and get to see and do so many different things, but I'll always go back to those very formative years when I just learned the lesson of, it's not about you. It's about, doing what you need to do to get the job done, to get the broadcast on, to get what the listener needs.